Hey there, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Game On, a podcast brought to you by Bay Hackle Sports. Jeff Taylor alongside Jack Taylor. And before we get talking high school basketball, which it's hard to believe the private schools are already in their playoffs, the public schools, 1 week left. We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, congrats to the Philadelphia Eagles, who I think 99.9% of the country was rooting for the most part. But a couple of, guys got to participate. And, for Will Shipley, from played at Weddington, played at Clemson. Let's see. You win I think you won a state title at Weddington.
He did. He won a couple.
And then Clemson.
He missed the national championship teams, but
and now your rookie year, you get drafted by the Eagles, who happen to have the best running back in the NFL, and you win a Super Bowl ring. Kind of crazy.
Yeah, really awesome experience for him. Running backs, it's hard to get drafted that high. It was a 4th-round draft pick for him, and he, made obviously a huge impact in the end, or not a huge impact, but he had a pretty big impact in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah.
I got a chance to talk with his parents, and we got a chance to talk with him before the game. So he was really excited about it. He's getting married over the summer, so he's gonna have
I did not know that. He's
gonna have two rings on his finger.
Okay. Don't ask him which one's more important.
So I asked his parents. He said they're not going to give an answer to that one. So, but they would say the wedding ring is definitely probably more important. But it's pretty exciting. His parents were there. They went to New Orleans to watch the game. Yeah. So pretty cool to see him. And then you had also Jordan Davis on the defensive side of the ball. He had a sack in the game from Mallard Creek High School. So that was it was cool to see a couple different Charlotte guys have a pretty big impact.
Eagles defense was crazy.
It was, absolutely.
Yeah, I texted James Shipley this morning at 9, but I hadn't heard back.
Yeah,
I got a feeling it was a pretty long night.
Hard.
So congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles. Congratulations to Will Shipley. I know it was great for him. So we make the shift here and talk a little high school basketball. And obviously, if I'm correct, the private schools, they start their state tournament tomorrow.
Yep. So the private schools, they're a bit more involved when it comes to basketball. They've got a lot more teams. For private schools, for football, you just have a couple teams, so you only really have a Division I and Division II. Whereas for basketball, they have 4A, 3A, 2A, 1A,
which is cool.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of teams getting to play, and they're all very competitive. So they all have a pretty involved tournament. So for the 4A, the 1 seed Cannon. They've been dominant all year long, 23-7 for the girls. So they get a bye, so they'll get to play. So they don't play till the quarterfinals, and they'll take on either North Raleigh Christian or Forsyth Country Day. Then Charlotte Country Day is the 5th seed at 19-10. So they host. They'll be playing Durham Academy, and the winner of that game will go into Georgia to take on Raven Gap.
Which is still the most bizarre thing, but either way.
It is. The 6th seed Charlotte Latin, 16-8, and they're taking on Cary Academy. So they are at home for the first round. The winner of that game will take on Providence Day, the 3 seed in the quarterfinals. So Providence Day has a bye as well. So they're 24-7.
Yeah, not a surprise.
No surprise there. And then Covenant Day School is on the road. They're going to be taking on Ravenscroft. The winner of that game will play Wesleyan Christian Academy in the quarterfinals.
Right.
So then you go to the 3rd round.
Real quick though, the 1 seed was Cannon. Is that what we said?
It's Cannon.
I actually had them on the podcast. I think 2 years ago, and just the culture they've built there, the culture of winning, the culture of strong D. They've put quite a program together there. An impressive group.
Absolutely. No, they're a very strong team. So then for the 3A, you've got the 1 seed is Grace Christian School. So they'll get a bye. They actually have 5 rounds for the 3A. They've got enough teams to have a first round, a second round, a quarterfinals, a semifinals, and the championship. So they get a 2-game bye.
Right.
So they don't have to play to the quarterfinals.
Right.
So they'll have multiple games before they get to that point. Yeah.
It's almost like the ACC now.
Yeah, there's going to be a good amount there before they can wait, before they have to actually play a game. So then also, and only the top 2 seeds though. So then Concord Academy is the other team that'll have a bye in the girls. They're 24-6, so they're gonna wait until Saturday to play a game. So for that round, they'll go Tuesday, Thursday, and then Saturday. In the 4A, they'll go Tuesday and Friday.
Got it.
With the semifinals being that consecutive next Tuesday. There's some games in the 2A and the 1A to look at, but says before the rounds boil down, these are the teams that we're looking at to start. Same thing with the 4A for with the boys' side. So on the boys' side, you've got. Let me look here. We've got the number 1 seed, like we were talking about beforehand, is Christ School.
Right.
23-2. They've been dominant all year long.
Absolutely.
When you only have 2 losses, that's pretty impressive. So they'll get a bye. which means that the winner of Rabun Gap versus Cannon at 14 and 11,
right.
Rabun Gap at 13 and 15. The winner of that game will head to Christ School for that second round because, again, they'll have a bye in the quarterfinals.
Right.
Carmel Christian at the 2 seed. We were expecting that. They're 16 and 8. They've had a lot of some big wins, some tough losses, but some big wins as well. So they'll take on the winner of Charlotte Country Day and Ravenscroft. So they'll see who they're going to play in that one.
Right.
You go down the list. Providence Day School sitting at the 3 seed for
Which
the
is
boys.
weird because they actually had 4
losses
than the 2 seed.
Yeah, they were 26 and 4.
Right.
So whether it's strength of schedule, I know.
I guess it's got to have some play in it.
Carmel Christian has had a tougher out of conference schedule. You know,
Agreed.
they have their annual tournaments, so they do put on a big performance. But it is interesting to see that. So Providence Day School will play the winner of Charlotte Latin and Wesleyan Christian. Charlotte Latin will be on the road to Wesleyan Christian. And then Covenant Day School at the 4 seed, they get a bye as well. And they'll be playing the winner of Durham Academy or Forsyth Country Day. I saw Forsyth Country Day play at the MLK game. They had they were pretty dominant too. They were taking on Hickory. It was a pretty big game. And then the 3A for boys basketball, you'll have the number 1 seed, Concord Academy. No surprise there as well. 29 and 3. They've been dominant. They'll be playing they'll actually is the same thing. They get 2 weeks off.
Right.
So they have they get 2 games off. So they get to wait until the quarterfinals and bypass those other rounds. And then that's the main team in the 3A that we're really looking at because there's some other ones. You have Gaston Christian, you have Southlake Christian, and then you'll have a couple of different schools to look at. Davidson Day, Greensboro Day, Asheville Christian Academy. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Yeah.
But that's going to be going on throughout the next 2 weeks. They get going, just like in football, a week ahead of time. So it should be interesting to see coming into the end of the month.
I'm curious as to why they do the football and the basketball different.
Well, you just have
more
less
teams.
Yeah, so you just have more teams. There's
like
absolutely more teams. I mean,
those schools don't have football teams.
Absolutely not. When you look at, the biggest indicator is Carmel Christian.
Yeah.
They have a huge basketball program.
Right.
They're a giant school.
Right.
But they don't have the facilities.
Right.
Whether it's the facilities, the funding, or just the desire to put up a football team.
Yeah.
I mean, it's right there. Right down the road from Charlotte Christian. It's right down the road from Providence Day, just heading down 52.
Right.
And so they could put up a football team if they would like to.
That's true. I didn't think about that.
There's a couple other ones that, that don't have football teams. So I think it's just a sheer matter of the ability to have, that play out. And so, and plus the level of when you have smaller roster sizes, it's, you look at
you can fill those a lot easier than
look at the difference between, in terms of football for Providence Day or Covenant Day. There's schools that they exist, in that same arena. Funding, is a little different, but just the success rates of Providence Day and Covenant Day, as it stands right now. But where basketball comes into play, for private school basketball, they're all pretty online.
Right.
You see a lot of winning teams, very few losing teams. Maybe some teams that are just below 500. So I think it's good to see. And then you get, more dynamic tournaments.
Right. Yeah.
So it's pretty good to see.
Kind of cool. Okay, then obviously, so they're in the playoffs. Public schools, last couple of games, Tuesday and Friday night. And as we take a look at some of them, for me, I still go back and we talked about it a little bit last week, was, I had a chance to finally see Lake Norman, both the guys and the girls. And they're strong all the way across. And the thing I noticed about the girls when they played Hickory Ridge the other night was the depth coming off the bench. And I think the interesting part is when I guess you have that strong of a team, your players get a chance to play. So, your strength depends, I guess, on how good your starting 5 make out.
Yeah.
But having those kids get those experiences and get the playing time just solidifies how good you are. And I noticed the same thing. I actually could only stay for the first half of the guys. And actually, kudos to Hickory Ridge because I think it was a pretty close ball game at the half. And they may have only lost by 7, I think, if I'm correct. So, Lake Norman, and on both the girls and guys, as we get down to the, final couple of games and head to the playoffs, you got to look at both of those.
Absolutely. I think that's been the slight issue. And we've seen this in some years past where there is a big discrepancy between the successful teams and the not successful teams. With football, it's been fairly even keel. But when you look at the basketball teams, outside of and the teams that are dominant on both the boys and
Right.
girls. Lake Norman's the same way. North Mech is
North
the same
Mech,
way.
that was my second, yeah.
They both populate the top 5 in either side, but then you see a lot of just middle of the road teams or like really small record teams. I mean, even Charlotte Catholic 18-5, they're sitting at the 12 seed. Mooresville 19-3, they're at the or not the seed, but ranking.
Right.
Even Hopewell is 17-5 and they're 17. North Mech is 20-2 and they're ranked around number 4. So you see a big discrepancy between just the records show a difference in the amount of competition that you're seeing.
Right.
I think whereas especially if you look like the difference between like if you look right down the road at York County's been going back to back. It's been really a competitive and like tomorrow or on Tuesday, Indian Land and Fort Mill both 22-2.
Wow.
Both playing each other. And that's going to be
that gym will be rocking.
That's going to be a huge game in that one. When you look and see, and then South Point for the girls' side, South Point is 24-0 for the girls' team. They have not lost a game all year long.
Wow.
And so it's interesting to see just like right down the road. I mean, like you said, there's some there's dominant teams in the area. There's clearly some dominant teams, but it's been a little bit more lopsided, I'd say. You see, especially in terms of like Porter Ridge for the men, they're 4-17. The women are popping off, and they're going to have a big game up against Weddington.
Right.
Whereas the men's game between Weddington and Porter Ridge is a 17-5 team taking on a 4-17 team.
Right.
So there's been or like Mallard Creek. Mallard Creek's 11-11. The West Mech men's basketball team hasn't won a single game all season. They're 0-21.
Really?
0-20. Now they play an incredibly hard conference.
No, yeah.
And their strength of schedule outside of it was tough as well. But that's where you look like when you have the private schools right there,
right,
and as competitive it's been there. You have, girls basketball has had some sort of competitiveness, but it's still been really just the big 3, of these teams like Lake Norman, like North Mech. Hopewell is still staying around in both sides of the ball as well. That's going to be a big game on Tuesday. That's going to be Hopewell versus North Mech, and that's going to be a pretty big game for that area. That's 2 pretty ranked teams. That's like I said, 4-17,
right.
And then for the women, but the women for Hopewell aren't ranked, but the men are, the women for North Mech are. So it's a lot to look at, especially when you had last year we had dominant teams and North Mech was dominant, Lake Norman was dominant, and then Myers Park was,
right.
And then you still saw Charlotte Catholic put up numbers. Central Cabarrus is fallen from grace compared to where they were, losing at least 10 games this season. That's more games than they've lost. Myers Park's 12-10. I mean, they're just trying to get
back to when you lose a coach like Coach Taylor.
Yeah. But for Central Cabarrus, that hasn't lost more than 10 games in the last 5 years.
Right.
And cumulative.
Right.
So it's something in the water this year when it comes. It'll be interesting to see how they go about when they get to when state play opens up.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see how this area does after trying to defend having a title last year. It'll be interesting to see how the area does.
Yeah, I mean, just depends on how the bracket all plays out.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get teams like who just quietly, I don't know, I need to look because I didn't have a chance to look in. Audrey Kell with Coach Kraft.
Yeah, let me see. I've got it pulled up right here.
Because, that's a team that's always been, somebody you don't want to play,
mm-hmm.
no matter what their record is.
Or the sport, to be quite honest.
Well, yeah.
Whether it's football, baseball, basketball.
Right, no matter what. AK always seems to be kind of strong with that. But Coach Kraft, man doesn't take any time off. During the summer, he's teaching camps left and right.
Yeah, I mean, they're 17-5. That's going to be a big one.
Really? Wow, okay.
They're playing Olympic, who's 15-6.
Okay.
So that'll be a big game at in the
That'll be
castle.
for seeding in that seeding for the tournament, probably.
More than likely, with the last few games of the season coming up.
Right.
So there's some interesting games to look at. Chambers is taking on West Charlotte. That'll be a big one. 14-8 versus a 10-11. There's some rivalry there as well. So there are definitely still some good the rivalries have been a bit more lopsided in the years past, which in football they have been as well, but there's been some areas for upsets. And so I think that's the big thing is that there's, been chances for upsets, not a whole lot of routing, but it will be interesting to see how it comes to play for conference play, how it comes for tournament play as well.
Do you think the shift that some kids have made from public to private has made a difference? Not that it's been a huge jump, but there have been kids who've made the move, or moving from point A to point B. Is it just we're getting to the point now where?
I think the problem with basketball at the high school level is not only do you have the ability, you could do, get into private a bit more if
Right.
we'd like to. I mean, of course, the spots are incredibly limited. I think that's the big thing that you see is that the roster spots being as limited as they are, whether they're transferring or moving, going from public to private. But then also even just there, the big thing that's been around, is going to AAU or different basketball leagues outside of high school.
Yeah, I mean, like, think about it. I mean, if you're a high schooler and go play AAU and then see if you get. I mean, you could get a shot at the NBA out of AAU, correct?
Yeah, you could.
So why go to? Why go to college?
You go to these different academies.
Don't get me wrong. You know what I'm saying?
You go to these different academies. You build your way up. And you've seen the last 3 years. There's been multiple top 5 picks that weren't from a college program, and they weren't from a foreign program either.
Right.
They were from a AAU or a type of league like that. And then the other, like you see, if you look a little bit around, you'll see kids that didn't make their high school squads, but then they're starting and playing on AAU squads, and they're performing well. So there's a bit of a discord. There's something that's not clicking. When you have just that many different options.
Which gets, you mentioned there's been a slip, in the rivalries of football and everything else, which gets back to the point of when they had the ACC Media Days this year for basketball, talking to a couple of coaches, they were saying how they brought in 5 kids on their team to add. 4 of them were transfer.
Yeah.
And 1 was a true freshman.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, if the academies, the AAU, make the jump and see where life takes you instead of putting in the hard work and maybe getting a shot at college, maybe not. I don't know.
It's interesting to see, but that's where, and that's the other thing is that in terms of like the same discourse with the talent for football being there's a step difference. Like this area has continued to progress throughout, and basketball has kind of kept the same programs for the last few years have been the ones that have been successful.
Right.
Have been a bit. It's been a bit rarer to see a breakout program that you weren't expecting to see. It's been your Central Cabarrus, it's been your North Mecca, it's been your Lake Norman, it's been these your Mars Park, these squads that have continued to build up and build from within. So I think it's going to be interesting to see especially how the reclassification is, if it's going to affect basketball or not. We've talked so much about football,
right?
And I don't know how that does affect basketball because you still have your 4A, your 3A from what I understand. So it'll be interesting to see how that will affect basketball and how that will affect these different rivalries. And if these rivalries...
Are they doing that with basketball, or we don't know yet?
I have to look into that.
I don't know yet, yeah.
It's not been very
It hasn't
clear.
been notified. Yeah, there hasn't been a lot of notification about it.
And even if it doesn't, you still, like, these basketball rivalries do get fueled a little bit by the football rivalries. You can take Butler and Indy and... Yeah, I mean, you take
Providence AK.
Yeah, Providence A Christian. Like it does get fueled a bit by it because you're coming straight out of a lot of the times, coming straight out of the
last
playoffs,
game of the season or something.
Last game of the season,
right
into opening. And sure, it's non-conference, but then you're getting more non-conference football games, and especially with the and non-conference tournament games for basketball, there's been a bit more of a connection there. So I think that will be interesting to see how and if it does affect the sports on the other scales, because that's what you see, when in college ball, when SMU goes to the ACC. Okay, well now every team that every sport that is at that school has to go to the ACC if it exists. If it's built for it in that league. So that's going to be interesting to see how that would affect the other sports at that level, travel, games, things of that nature. It's going to be interesting.
Going to be interesting. Well, it's going to be an interesting week. So for those of y'all out there listening, Jack's going to hold down the fort. Mm-hmm. I have to go to Daytona. Mm-hmm. Bummer.
Yeah. Boo-hoo.
To catch the 500. But so we'll take care of all of that. We'll recap the private schools. Get you set for next week, which would be the beginning of the state tournament, and we'll see what happens. Mm-hmm. Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, listen, that's going to wrap it up for Game On for this week. Make sure you check us out. You subscribe, like, comment, whatever you do, wherever you listen to your podcast or get it, make sure you check out Game On. We're going to get out of the winter season. We'll get into spring as we roll around with baseball and softball and all the other spring sports. So we'll keep update on all of that. Until then, have a great week. We will see you next week and talk to you next week on Game On.